Okay, so there we go. That really didn't spray too badly. I guess I should have just sprayed it straight out of the bottle to start with, but hey, that's how you learn, just from testing. We'll just set that aside, see what happens. And this that I already sprayed, that's touch dry, and we already know that's not going to work. So I'm just going to go ahead and come back and spray this full thickness stuff on there, because we know we're going to need to do that anyway. Okay, so there we go. That's a nice wet layer of this acrylic gloss black base just hosed on there. Nice and wet. So we'll let it all dry and come back to it in a few hours and see what's up. Okay, gangsters, so it's been about 3 hours since I sprayed this gloss black base. And I feel like at this point I should be able to do just about anything I want to with it. So let's see. Let's do the thumbprint test first of all. I would not expect the acrylic to allow a thumbprint at all. But I tell you what, I notice immediately, even before that, is how slick and shiny that patch right there looks. And I gotta tell you, dudes, I mean, at this point, that is seriously impressive to me. I would bet just about any amount of money that you'd never get that level of gloss from anything called an acrylic. I have tried Tamiya's gloss black acrylic and promptly threw it away. It just was not any good. So that's pretty impressive. And you can see I just now peeled my thumb off of that, and it was not sticky at all. So, wow, that is pretty cool. Now, here, I'm going to peel this piece of tape off of here just because. Let's try the lacquer side. Let me hold on to that for a second. In the meantime, we can also look at this patch where I sprayed the gloss black on top of the already existing acrylic primer. And you can see why I was talking about not spraying the stuff on top of the primer, just to make sure I got a really true test of its potential for gloss, because it definitely affected it. You can see right here where I sprayed the thinner version of it, that it definitely is not that glossy, and it's a little bit better over here where I sprayed it at full thickness, but still not as good as it is on this test piece. So that kind of makes my point. Now, I am peeling my thumb off of this lacquer side, and yep, there's a thumbprint. And again, this is a little bit confusing to me because I just would not expect to be able to do that with a gloss lacquer, and I base that experience, or I base that comment on my experience. You guys notice how I just yanked that piece of masking tape off of there, and that acrylic primer didn't budge? I wasn't even thinking about that, but that's good. Anyway, I base my comments about what I expect from a gloss black lacquer on my experience with Guns GX2, which is this right here. This is shot straight on the plastic with Guns GX2. And that stuff is just fantastic. It behaves like a lacquer in every way that you would expect a lacquer to, but it brings the shine right just right out of the spray gun. No polishing necessary. So this is a whole lot confusing for me. I have no idea what to think about this, because in this case, the acrylic behaved almost as well as this gun's lacquer did. I mean, when you look at these two things right next to each other, it's pretty damn impressive. This one is supposed to be an acrylic, and I know I didn't get these mixed up, but it behaves like a lacquer. This one is supposed to be a lacquer, but it behaves more like an enamel. And I don't know if maybe that, the way that it smelled had something to do with that or what. I don't know, but we're going to let this sit for another 24 hours and see what happens when we look at it tomorrow. But those are very interesting results. And I will also talk with Christian about these things. And this is a good moment to bring up something else. A couple of days ago, I posted a picture of my results with this primer, and complete with the thumbprint in the enamel stuff on SMCG. And Christian is a member there, and he almost immediately responded. And he was like, hey, I think that bottle of enamel primer may be a bad bottle. We had a problem with our early production run. I'm sorry. We'll send you a new one immediately, and I think you'll be more impressed. And I was just blown away by how straightforward and upfront he was in his response. That is a far cry from the last time I said something publicly that was negative about a paint manufacturer, back when I was working on my Honda RC213V. When I made some comments about that stuff and the problems it caused me, the owner of the company got on the SMCG group and told me I was a bad workman and that I shouldn't be blaming my tools. So yeah, very different responses. And I'm really impressed with Christian. Then we had a long discussion about the chemistry of all of this stuff and the way these things interact. And it's clear that he has a little bit of problem with English. It's definitely not his first language, so that's a little bit of a challenge for him. Looks like I got some super glue on that from some stuff I was doing last night. Anyway, English is not his first language, and that makes communicating about some of this chemistry stuff a little bit challenging, but I just have a lot of respect for his attitude. He clearly knows his stuff. He's a professional painter, and he knows a lot about paint chemistry, and he's passionate about the quality of his product, and that really shows. So good stuff. Now, during that first exchange about the primer, he said, hey, I'm going to send you a new bottle of that, and also we're going to send you the rust kit. And guess what showed up in the mail by the courier just like an hour ago? So let's look and see what's in here. This is real rust, and this is going to be an interesting product to test out because I have only seen some pictures and things that Christian has posted, and this I don't believe is a paint. I mean, it says brush acrylic, so we're going to see what's up with that. But this, I believe, is a rusting solution, okay? There's what's called the activator brown. In other words, when I say a rusting solution, my understanding is that this actually involves possibly iron oxide, and it gets activated kind of like you would see with burnishing fluid. Okay, iron rust. This is activator number 2. Definitely going to have to get some instructions on how to use this stuff. Okay, dark rust. I'm just going to dump this out here. Okay, so this is copper green. This is rust converter. And you can see that this fluid is, I mean, it's definitely not paint. And then this is, let's see here, this is real rust dark green. And then this is old brass, real rust. So that's all interesting stuff. And then this is oxide clear coat. So I'm not sure what that means, but that's going to be interesting. So there's going to be more stuff to test. I'm not totally sure how this works. I'm going to have to get some instructions from Christian, but the test just got even more interesting. And what I may do is break this stuff out in its own little video rather than include it with all of this paint stuff. Okay, dudes, so it is actually 2 days later since I sprayed these gloss base materials from kcolors. I was going to deal with this yesterday, but just had to do work on other stuff. So, at any rate, here we are. Now, you can see that there's another fingerprint, maybe, if you remember where the fingerprints were. This is the fingerprint I started with about 3 hours after I sprayed it. This less offensive fingerprint is one that I put in it yesterday. So now I'm going to just hold it with my thumb again to do the super scientific Rube Goldberg Enterprises thumbprint calibrated experiment and see what happens while I'm talking. This has been a really interesting experience because as I've been doing this test, I've been conversing with Christian, who is the owner and developer at kcolors, on Facebook, right out there in public in the Scale Modelers Critique group. And it's been really cool. I have to give mad props to Christian for doing his best to answer questions, especially given the language barrier. Like I said, English is obviously not his first language, but he knows his stuff, and he's definitely making an effort, and I really respect that. He has handled everybody's questions really very, very nicely. And he kind of paid me a compliment. He said, when I showed this picture of this acrylic gloss, he said, "Wow, you're the first person that got it 90% of the way without me giving him any instructions." So kind of a backhanded compliment, I guess, but I was pleased nonetheless. And I said, "Okay, so exactly how should I have sprayed it?" And he said, "You should spray from 15 centimeters away," which horrified me because that's like 7 inches and about 3 times as far as I normally spray, at 2 to 2.5 bar. And at about a 0.3 millimeter needle. So, look, 2 out of 3 isn't bad because I did shoot that at 2 bar, which is 30 psi roughly. And my Iwata Neo has a 0.35 millimeter needle. So, I feel like I got 2 out of 3. And he showed a spoon that has a better result than this. But I'm not going to repeat that for 2 reasons. One, this is, I think, good enough for the purposes of this test. The other is that I just don't agree with testing on spoons. If I tested everything on spoons, that might be one thing, because at least it would be consistent. But spoons are popped out of diamond-polished injection molds by the millions, and they are far smoother than anything on a scale model is ever going to be, other than maybe a Tamiya canopy. There's just no reason for a scale model kit company to spend the time and money polishing a hardened steel tool to the degree that a plastic spoon manufacturer is going to. And we certainly are never going to get our paint that smooth. So I kind of prefer to just do it this way as a real world test. So that's good. But there are a couple of little flecks of trash in there that you may be able to see. It's not perfect. So just out of curiosity, I am going to do a quick polish, quick sand and polish, that is, and we'll see what happens. Now, as I've been talking, obviously, I've been holding on to this with my thumb, and you can see right there what resulted. So this is pretty confusing, and I can feel that thumbprint even with my limited sensitivity on my fingertips. So it is well and truly burned in there. It's not just a grease print. So I'm not going to mess with the lacquer version anymore. I don't really know what's going on with that, but as far as I'm concerned, anything labeled a lacquer should withstand a thumbprint within an hour after shooting it. So again, there are lots of different recipes for these things. But that, for me, right there, as nice as it looks when I sprayed it, I still have to call a failure in this test because it's just not a fully cured layer of paint, which is what I want before I go on. Now, there are people who have said that, and this is generally in response to conversations about All-Clad's gloss black base enamel never curing, that, oh, it's supposed to be that way. You need it to not be cured so that the metallic that you spray on top of it, and specifically the chrome stuff, will stick to it. And that's why the chrome stuff rubbed off so easily, because you let your gloss black base cure for too long and it doesn't have anything to stick to. Yeah, well, sorry. I think that's a terrible theory. Even All-Clad themselves don't say that. As far as I know, and if you can't have your paint cured completely and do what it's supposed to do, then it's just wrong. I mean, that's my opinion about it. I just I'm not able to comprehend any other way of looking at it. And so if that's the situation here with this, then okay, so be it. But that's just not a strategy or a workflow that I'm going to want to incorporate. I would rather put a clear coat like Aqua Gloss on top of a layer of chrome than constantly worry about whether or not it's ever going to cure. And I have in fact experienced the All-Clad chrome rubbing off of a layer of not well cured All-Clad gloss black base enamel anyway. So I just think the whole thing is not true. But not to get too sidetracked, I just don't think this is effective. So I'm going to focus on the acrylic stuff. And I'm going to just very quickly do a quick bit of wet sanding and knock down those high spots. So just get a little water going there. Got a piece of 2500 grit paper, and just give it a quick cut and then a quick polish and see how things go. Okay, so there we go. I'm pretty pleased with the way that flattened out under wet sanding. I mean, that's really good. It's not super hard. It flattened out with that 2500 grit just fine. So now let's see what happens when I throw a little polish on it. And for that, I've got my Proxon and a little buffing wheel, and some Zam. This is kind of turning into my go-to polishing compound because it's so easy. It's one step. You just jam the wheel in there and get a little bit on there and have a go. Let's see what happens. Okay, so there we go. That's just obviously a very quick and dirty cut and polish. I could easily have justified graduating down from 2500 grit to some finer sandpaper, but yeah, I think you get the point. There are obviously some scratches left on this that are, I could justify working them out if this was really the real deal. But that's that's pretty impressive for just rubbing on it for a few minutes with some sandpaper and then going to a quick polish. I am completely befuddled by this, because if you handed me this thing blind and didn't tell me what paint was on here and just said mess with it, polish it, sand it, whatever, and then identify what kind of paint it is, I would have immediately said, well, this is an enamel and this is a lacquer. I would never have guessed that this is an acrylic. For the gloss to start with, and the fact that it could be cut and polished as effectively as I did. So pretty cool stuff. I'm impressed. And now the next thing we'll move on to is spraying some of the kcolors chrome on this and see what we get from that. Okay guys, it is finally the fun part of this test. It is the day after I did the polishing on the gloss black base, and I'm ready to start squirting some colors. So I've just randomly chosen the dark gold gray number 2, which is supposed to represent FS 36231, which I think is very cool that they put that right there on the bottle. And then we've got this Russian cockpit green, which is a color that I know interests a lot of people. Now, the other thing is that if you notice, this one is the acrylic opaque, which, if I understand their catalog correctly, that's kcolors designation for flat. And this one is just the regular. So I chose those because I thought it would be a good test of just what the differences are in the level of sheen that we get. So we are going to get to spraying now. Something that I thought was kind of interesting is these are water-based. And they don't really have, a real strong smell, but the smell they do have is really kind of weird. I haven't ever really smelled anything like it before, so we'll see what happens. But before I dump any paint in the cup, I'm going to blow a little bit of alcohol through the airbrush, because I blew a little bit of lacquer thinner through it a second ago just to make sure it was clear. I always try and remember to do that first thing in the morning in case the needle is stuck from the previous day, if I forgot to take the needle out at the end of the day like I often do. And I'm going to use this nasty, filthy pipette and get some paint. Now, a lot of you might be freaking out right now, but these pipettes are great because not only are they cheap, but you can reuse them if you're careful about it. This has had nothing but lacquer run through it, which is dry on the inside, so there shouldn't be any contamination when I stick it in this bottle of water-based paint. And as you can see, I'm going to spray it right out of the bottle. My gut instinct was that it was thin enough to do that. So we'll see how it goes. We'll just start out with that, and I'll do a little bit of black basing type stuff, and so I'll go to a higher level of thinner later on in the experiment, but I'm just going to start spraying, and I'm not going to say anything so that I can then just put this on fast motion when I edit it, but I'm doing this at 15 psi, and I'm going to spray just a full opaque coat on part of this, and then I'll do a little bit of black basing type stuff in a different section. So here we go. Well, I immediately have to say something because for whatever reason that's spitting a little bit. So I'm going to crank the pressure up to 20. Definitely better. Okay, so time for some commentary about this whole thing so far. I am really impressed with the way this stuff sprays. I mean, you guys watched me right there spray what I think is a fairly tight pattern, considering that it's an Iwata Neo with a 0.35 millimeter needle in it and at 20 psi. You can see pretty clearly that if I let the spray pattern get big, that I got some overspray. But if I kept the nozzle pointed in toward the pattern and sprayed it tight and small, that it was pretty well behaved. And you can see where I sprayed over here just full density, that the opacity comes up very quickly. It's got good coverage. I think this was a good color choice to test that. So, pretty impressed. I got a little bit of tip dry there in the middle where it started to not want to spray quite as cleanly, so I just used a Q-tip dipped in alcohol to take care of that. And it did pretty well. I mean, it was not as trouble-free as MRP, but nowhere near as bad as something like Vallejo or Model Master Acrylic. Now, here's what I am noticing that's a little bit troublesome. I'm having a lot of difficulty getting it cleaned out of my airbrush. I have now flushed this airbrush, I think 5 times with alcohol-based cleaner, with water, and even with lacquer thinner. And when I backflow, I'm still getting paint particles in there. Hopefully you can see in there and see that. Definitely still paint particles down inside the cup. And I can see that there's still paint clear down around the needle. So I'm not sure what to think about that. I'm not going to worry too much about it at the moment because I want to get on with this test, but I can tell when I'm spraying out that alcohol that's in there right now that the airbrush is clogged up. So maybe I'll pull the needle right now and see what we got. So you can see I've definitely got a skin of paint on that needle, so I'm going to go ahead and wipe that off with some lacquer thinner, and I'm sure that'll help. You can see there's definitely a lot of that black base coat and primer on there from yesterday too. So probably should have pulled that needle when I was done working yesterday, but as usual, I forgot. If you look down in there, you may be able to see, I don't know if I can get enough light inside there, but probably not. But there is definitely still some paint stuck down in there around where the needle comes through. So okay, so this is really interesting to me. The airbrush is performing abysmally at this point. I can barely get anything out of it. It's totally choked up, and I'm gonna have to take it apart. But here's what's fascinating is this pipette was used with just the acrylic black base and primer over the last couple of days. And when I pulled paint into it from this bottle, I got mixing. Clearly, either what was in that pipette wasn't dry or it attacked it. So that's kind of interesting. That's not what's causing the clogging though. This airbrush is just totally stuffed up. So I am going to do a quick clean out as best I can so that I can put a thin layer of paint on top of this, and we can kind of get past this part of the test. Okay, so I decided I was going to have to stop and take this airbrush apart, but I flushed it about 5 times with lacquer thinner until it was sort of clear, although there were still globules of gray paint in the lacquer thinner. And I just now shoved this cleaning brush into the needle bore with lacquer thinner on it, and that's what came out. So I don't know, this is definitely troublesome. Okay, well that was a bit of a debacle, but I got the airbrush clean, and we're gonna go at this again. Now, I'm wondering if maybe my little spritz of lacquer thinner followed by some alcohol when I first started this morning is the culprit here. It's possible that I had some remnants of lacquer thinner in there, and that's maybe what caused some coagulation and the clogging that I experienced. So this airbrush is now dry. It's been about 30 minutes since I finished cleaning it. The last thing I ran through it after I finished cleaning it was alcohol, but now I'm going to put some water in here, and I'm going to back flush that. So we're going to make sure there is nothing inside of this airbrush but water, which it's passing just fine. And now I am going to mix up a thinner version of this gray color and do a blend layer of the gray. So I'm going to go with that should be about 1/3 paint to 2/3 thinner right there, which is not a bad starting place for doing a black basing blend layer. Get that good stirred up there. Still looks relatively thick to me, but we'll see. Maybe the issue with what I sprayed before is that even though it felt like it was thin enough to airbrush right out of the bottle, maybe it was too thick, I don't know. But we'll see. I didn't think it was too thin when I was spraying it because you may have noticed that I did have a little bit of spidering in a couple of places. So I'm going to cut the pressure down on this to about 10. Okay, so I'm just under 10 psi, and I'm just going to start blending this in. Okay, well, there you go. That sprayed out actually pretty well. You can see that it wanted to sort of pool and flow a couple of times, but I was able to keep it relatively well under control, so I'm pretty impressed by that. I didn't have any tip dry problems, and I was able to do, I think, a pretty decent job of blending and doing some post shading and just kind of putting some tonal variety in that section. So I think that went pretty well. Now the question is going to be, how well does it clean out? One thing that I kind of noticed while I was spraying is, and you can sort of see that separation that's happening there in the paint, is that it seemed like that the color got a lot darker as I went along. So that's sort of interesting. And it also kind of seemed like while I was spraying it, that it initially looked like it was breaking up on the surface a little bit, but it coagulated and dried just fine, and there don't seem to be any issues. So that looks pretty good. Now we'll see how things look when I start trying to clean the airbrush. I decided that since I've got the really thin mixture in there, before I clean it out, let me see what happens when I just start the black basing with that mixture. You can see it gets away from me pretty quickly, but it's not like I have good trigger control. With a better airbrush for this type of small work, this mixture might actually work okay. I just can't quite crack it open and hold it at a small enough opening to really make that work well. But in a Sotar, for example, it might not be too bad. And if I hold it open a little more and just keep moving fast, it's not too bad. You can see what I mean there, though, about the paint kind of acting like it wants to break up when it's that thin. But I can dry that out pretty quickly with just some air from the airbrush. And then I can continue to build that up, and it seems to hold together pretty well. One thing I am noticing about this color is that I thought it was supposed to be less flat than the other one because of the labeling on the bottle, but it appears to be just as flat, no difference. So that's not too bad. It took me 3 layers to build up that level of opacity with it being this thin, but that's not too bad. So maybe the secret to keeping it from clogging up is not to spray it straight out of the bottle. I'll go back to that blue stuff later after I've done all my other testing and see if we can replicate this level of success. Okay, we're back for a part of the test that I have definitely been looking forward to, and that is spraying some metallics. So they sent me 4, and I've got the Aluminata, which I believe is just supposed to be regular aluminum, but it's confusing because it says chrome paint. And it was different because it shakes up as it feels quite a bit thicker in the bottle than these other 2 do. So I'm not sure what's up with that. Then I've got just plain aluminum, and it's called a metallic. And then I've got the 61 Shine, which is called a metallic. But in the catalog, it says this is supposed to be the chromiest. This is also supposed to be a very high reflectivity, but is darker because it's chrome 60 steel. So we're just going to get started and see what we come up with. I'm going to shoot the aluminum, or rather the 61 Shine and the chrome 60 steel on this section right here. And we'll see how that goes. I think I'm going to mask that. Now, in the instructions that are in the newest version of the kcolors catalog, they tell you to wait for 12 hours after you spray the gloss black base. And we definitely have done that. We've got more like 36 hours, so should be no issue there. I'm going to just spray this according to instinct. I am at 20 psi, but I think I'm going to cut it down to 15, so about 1 bar for you European guys. Okay, I'm going to let that sit there for a minute, and now I'm going to shoot this number 15 aluminum. And you notice I'm not cleaning the airbrush between. I tend to do that with metallics because they blend together so easily, and a quick squirt will purge whatever the first one was, and I feel fine about that. Now, that one smells significantly different from what I just shot, but it definitely says Airbrush acrylic. But it does not smell like an acrylic. This, wow, that smells 100% like an enamel. So, I'm not sure what's going on with that. Okay, so there were no surprises when I sprayed that. It basically looks like what I would expect pretty much any aluminum paint to look like. I didn't get any weird reactions, so I don't know what to say about the fact that it smells totally different, but it definitely does. Now I'm going to go for this Aluminata, and we'll see what it does. It is definitely thicker. And you can see that a lot more of it stays in the pipette, so probably have to get another pipette. But that's interesting. That's going on different. It smells pretty much like the other stuff, but it appears to be going on kind of glossy. And let's see, I don't know. I'm gonna blow some air on it, and it's drying off. But it got a lot better coverage with just one coat than the others did. But I'm gonna go ahead and give it another one. Okay, so I've been having these conversations with Christian on Facebook about cleaning this stuff because I had so much trouble with the colors that I was testing earlier today. He suggested using water with about 5 to 10% IPA in it, and so that's what I've got here in this bottle. And I am going to go ahead and rinse the color cup out from what I just did because I feel like that this paint, this Illuminata is different than the chrome, and I want that chrome to be as much of a pure test as possible. Okay, now something interesting I noticed when I was kind of flipping these around is that all of these, well, not all of them, these two chromes say alcohol base on the back. And that's this aluminum one that smelled real different. This one, however, which just says chrome paint, does not say that on the back. So that's kind of weird because this is the one that I thought smelled like an enamel. So we'll see if the other chrome smells the same way. And it does. It definitely does smell the same way. And I guess maybe now that I think about it, maybe this is the power of suggestion, it does not smell as much like an enamel as it does smell like alcohol. So I guess that's the explanation there. Definitely an alcohol base. Now, I don't expect this to be ready for a mask, but I would like to keep the two tones separate. So whatever, screw it. We'll just go for it. I'm just going to very lightly stick that on there. And this is the one paint that I've been the most curious about. Okay, so there we go. I am now going to just let these sit until tomorrow. That's nice. The Post-it didn't affect that at all. So that's good. What I understand from what Christian has told me is that the chrome effect is supposed to get better as it ages, I guess is the best way to put it. So we'll see tomorrow how these look. Right now they don't look too bad. Okay, gangsters, it's time to get back to work and carry on with some testing. Now, I'm going to branch out a little bit and try some of these, try these two chrome paints on a different substrate. This is one of my test pieces from when I was testing gloss black bases, and this is Gun's GX2 Uono Black, and as far as I know, it is the best gloss black base there is. I've tested Tamiya X1 with and without Mr. Leveling Thinner. I've tested MRP Ultra Gloss Black or Super Gloss Black, whatever it's called. And they don't even come close as far as I'm concerned. Even as good as the gloss black acrylic base from kcolors has proven to be right here in this video, it still doesn't quite match up to this. This is a lacquer, and that is straight out of the bottle, no polishing whatsoever. So I kind of feel like that it would be good to see how these two chrome paints perform on top of it. So I've got my airbrush here. I was smart enough to take the needle out last night, but let's put a little water in there and just blow that through just to make sure. Yep, everything's good. Okay, so let's get right into it. Now these are both, again, to re-emphasize, even though the labels are different, this one says chrome paint, doesn't say anything about alcohol. This one says metallic, and it does say it's alcohol based, but they both smell exactly the same, very strongly of alcohol. So I'm going to start here with the 61 Shine. Okay, so you can see that the results here are pretty impressive. This has to remind you a lot of All Clad's chrome and AK's 477 chrome. I'm going to do like Christian says and let this sit until tomorrow, so we see if the shine comes up anymore, and then we'll look at how durable it is, because we know that with All Clad chrome especially, it'll rub right off of a smooth surface. So hopefully this will be better in that respect. But you can see that I sprayed it in different thicknesses. Right here I did 2 layers, right here I did 3. Over here, I just kept kind of stacking it up because I wanted to see how it worked and how it affected the finish. And so right here, I built up like 5 or 6 layers, and you can see I still have really impressive reflectivity. It's not quite as hard of a reflection as it is over here where I only have 3 or 4 layers, but still, that is just really impressive. So I've got high hopes for this stuff. We'll see what happens.